2004, a mother dolphin off the coast of Florida surfaced beside a fishing boat with an injured calf tangled in a monofilament line. She did not flee. She positioned the calf alongside the hull, held it there, and waited. The fisherman leaned over and cut the line free. She had no reason to believe this would work. Dolphins and humans share no language, no social bond, no history of cooperation in any formal sense. The fisherman could have ignored her, spooked her, or made things worse. She approached him anyway, with her most vulnerable offspring, at the moment when the stakes could not have been higher. And this is not a one-off story. This exact pattern, wild animals bringing injured or helpless babies directly to humans, shows up across species that share almost nothing in common. Cats, dolphins, crows, elephants, whales, primates, different continents, different evolutionary histories, completely different brains. Yet the behavior keeps appearing. The obvious explanation is that animals somehow sense that humans are kind, that we give off some aura of safety that other predators do not. The real explanation is more specific and considerably stranger. Start with cats, because they make the clearest case. Feral and outdoor cats have a well-documented habit of bringing kittens to particular humans, not random people, specific ones. The neighbor who leaves food out, the person who once helped a stray with an injury, the one who moves slowly, speaks quietly, and has been doing both consistently for months. Cats are running a continuous, silent evaluation. They watch, catalog, and categorize the humans in their territory over weeks and months before any visible behavior changes. A person who is loud, unpredictable, or aggressive gets filed as a threat and stays filed there. A person who is calm, consistent, and associated with food gets reclassified over time as something closer to a trusted colony member. Once that reclassification happens, the same protective instincts a mother cat extends to a trusted adult feline begin to extend to that human. She did not decide you were good. She decided you were predictable. In the animal world, those two things are nearly the same. The cat is not making a philosophical judgment about human goodness. She is making a practical assessment based on accumulated observation. And when a crisis hits, when her kittens need warmth or shelter or medical care she cannot provide alone, she goes to the entity her months of quiet surveillance have identified as the safest available option. That logic is easy enough to understand in an animal that lives alongside humans. It gets harder to explain when it shows up in open ocean. Dolphins and whales live in tight social groups with cooperative care structures. Members of a pod share responsibilities for protecting calves, feeding together, and defending against predators. If a calf is sick or injured, healthy adults will physically support it at the surface so it can breathe. A 2008 study off the coast of South Korea documented a group of long-beaked common dolphins forming a living raft with their bodies, swimming side by side beneath an injured companion to keep her from drowning. 5 dolphins took turns supporting her until she eventually stopped breathing. They stayed with her body afterward. The cognitive architecture for recognizing that this individual needs help and that individual can provide it already exists inside the pod. What marine biologists have observed is that some cetaceans extend that same logic across species lines. A mother whale who positions a tangled calf beside a boat hull is applying a system she already uses within her own social group. The difference is that the helper she is selecting is not a dolphin, it is a human. This only works if the animal has some basis for believing the human will respond with care rather than harm. And that basis appears to be built the same way the cat builds hers, through repeated low-threat exposure. Humans who respond to distressed animals with slow movements, quiet voices, and careful hands get filed into a category that most wild animals never assign to a predator. Over time, a population of marine mammals living near fishing communities or research stations develops a collective sense of which boats, and even which individual humans, are safe. That idea, collective knowledge about specific humans, becomes much clearer when you look at crows. Research led by Dr. John Marsluff at the University of Washington demonstrated that American crows can learn the face of a dangerous human and maintain that identification for at least 5 years. The study used masks. Researchers wore a specific mask while trapping and banding crows at multiple sites near Seattle. Afterward, any person wearing that mask, regardless of body type, clothing, or location, was immediately scolded by crows who remembered the trapping event. But the finding that changed the conversation was what happened next. Crows that had never personally experienced the threat began scolding the same face. PET scans revealed that when crows viewed faces they associated with danger, the same brain regions activated as in humans processing fear: the amygdala, the thalamus, the brainstem. And juvenile crows, raised by parents who treated a particular human as dangerous, absorbed that assessment without ever encountering the person themselves. Trust, it turns out, is transmitted the same way. A crow whose parent treats a specific human as safe will grow up treating that human as safe. The assessment passes from one generation to the next through social learning, exactly the way a human child learns which neighbors are friendly without anyone sitting them down and explaining it. This means an individual human's reputation inside a crow population can outlast the lifespan of any single bird that originally formed the opinion. You are not being evaluated in isolation. You are being evaluated across years by a network of observers that shares information. Now scale that memory system up to elephants. Elephants operate with multi-generational social bonds and memories that can stretch across decades. A matriarch who received help from a specific human at a sanctuary or ranger station may remember that individual for 20 or 30 years. The Sheldrick Wildlife Trust in Kenya has documented multiple cases of entirely wild elephants approaching their headquarters when injured, positioning themselves in the most heavily trafficked part of the compound and waiting for veterinary help. In one case, a lactating mother with a wound on her leg walked directly to the busiest area of the Kaluku field station and stood there until the team noticed her. She could not have been more visible if she had tried. These were not elephants that had been raised in captivity. They were wild animals who had, through some chain of observation or prior experience, learned that this particular place and these particular humans meant safety. Elephants also appear to share this knowledge within their herds. A calf that watches its mother receive treatment from a ranger grows up with a different threat assessment of that ranger than a calf whose herd has only ever been chased by humans. When a herd brings an orphaned or injured calf to a ranger and then steps back and waits, the behavior looks almost impossibly deliberate, but it follows the same fundamental logic as the cat and her kittens. The animal has built a case file on a specific human or human location, and when the stakes become high enough, it acts on that assessment. There is, however, a less romantic layer to this that needs to be acknowledged. Sometimes what looks like trust is closer to desperation. A mother whose den is flooding, whose calf is drowning, whose options have collapsed to zero, may simply move toward the nearest large, slow-moving shape that does not smell like a predator. Humans carry a distinctive chemical signature, a mix of soap, fabric, cooked food, and sweat that reads very differently from a wolf or a big cat. Most mammals have scent-based memories precise enough to catalog individual humans the way they catalog members of their own herd. Once your particular scent is filed under non-threatening, that classification can persist for years. In a crisis where every second counts, not obviously dangerous may be all the information a desperate mother needs, but even the desperation explanation points to something significant. The fact that approaching a human registers as a better option than approaching anything else in the environment means animals have already, on some level, recalibrated their threat model around us. We did not earn that by being harmless. We earned it by being inconsistent, dangerous in some contexts and gentle in others, unpredictable enough that the animals who watch us closely can find patterns the ones who flee on instinct cannot. There is also a biological component that cuts across species. Research suggests that mammalian distress calls share structural similarities in pitch, rhythm, and urgency. A crying human infant and a distressed puppy trigger overlapping physiological responses in adult mammals, including faster heart rates and an impulse to investigate. Over generations, animals living near humans may have picked up on something consistent. When their offspring are in distress and humans are nearby, the humans tend to respond with help rather than aggression. That pattern, repeated enough times, becomes a survival strategy worth betting on. The clearest proof that this is learned rather than instinctive comes from where the behavior does not appear. You will not see animals bringing babies to humans in heavily hunted regions, in conflict zones, or in areas where human-wildlife interaction has historically been violent. The trust is not wired into the species. It is built locally, individually, through accumulated evidence that a specific population of humans has behaved in a specific way over a long enough period. It functions as a feedback loop. A human responds well to an animal in crisis. The animal's social group registers that response. Future members of that group inherit a slightly adjusted baseline, not quite trust, but a reduced fear. Over enough iterations, that reduced fear becomes something close to a working relationship, never spoken, never formalized, but real enough to activate when a life is on the line. So why do animals bring their babies to humans? Not because they sense some universal kindness in our species. Because individual animals in specific places have built individual assessments of individual humans over weeks, months, and sometimes generations. Every bowl of food left on a porch, every calm response to a frightened stray, every time a fisherman cut a line instead of motoring away, became a small entry in a ledger the animal was keeping without the human ever knowing it existed. When the worst moment arrives, that ledger is what gets opened. And the animals who kept the most careful records are the ones whose offspring survived to pass the lesson forward.